The storm came down from the mountains like the wrath of heaven itself, and Finn Zimmerman knew he was still 3 miles from Aztec when the first icy pellets began striking his face. November of 1883 had been unseasonably warm in New Mexico territory until this very day, and now winter was announcing itself with a vengeance that caught everyone unprepared. The trail ahead curved through a narrow canyon where the wind howled like wolves, and that was when he saw her, a dark figure stumbling along the road in what looked like nothing more than a threadbare dress, and a shawl so thin it might as well have been made of spider webs. Finn pulled his horse to a stop and dismounted in one smooth motion, his boots crunching on the gravel that was already beginning to frost over. The woman looked up at his approach, her face pale as milk, her lips taking on a bluish tinge that made his chest tighten with worry. She could not have been out here long, but already the cold was claiming her. "Madam, you need shelter," Finn said, already shrugging out of his heavy wool coat. The wind immediately cut through his flannel shirt like a knife, but he ignored it, stepping forward to drape the coat around her shoulders. She pulled back slightly, her eyes wide and frightened, though whether from him or the cold he could not tell. "You will catch your death," she said, her voice shaking so hard the words almost fell apart before reaching his ears. "I will be fine," Finn insisted, wrapping the coat more firmly around her frame. She was small, he realized, delicate in a way that made him think of the china teacups his mother used to keep in the cabinet back in Kansas before she died. "I've got a horse and I know these trails. You are on foot in nothing but cotton. Where were you headed?" The woman clutched the coat around herself, and he could see the moment when the warmth began to reach her, the way her whole body seemed to sag with relief even as she continued to shiver. "Anywhere," she said. "Anywhere but where I came from." Finn looked back down the trail in the direction she had been walking. There was nothing that way but wilderness and eventually the small settlement of Flora Vista, though that was a good 15 miles from here. In the opposite direction lay Aztec, with its handful of streets and buildings, including the boarding house run by Mrs. Patterson, a stern but kind woman who would not turn away someone in need. "Can you ride?" Finn asked, gesturing to his bay gelding, who stood patiently despite the worsening weather. "I have never tried," the woman admitted, and now that Finn looked at her more closely, he could see the refinement in her features, the way she held herself despite the obvious desperation of her situation. This was no frontier woman accustomed to hardship. This was someone who had known comfort and lost it or fled from it. "Then today you learn," Finn said, leading her to the horse. "I am going to help you up, and you are going to hold on tight to the saddle horn. I will walk alongside and make sure you do not fall. We need to get to town before this storm gets worse." She nodded, and when he placed his hands on her waist to lift her, he could feel how thin she was beneath the layers of fabric and his coat. She weighed almost nothing, and he settled her into the saddle with ease. Her hands gripped the horn so tightly her knuckles went white. "What is your name?" Finn asked as he took the reins and began leading the horse forward at a steady walk. "Helena," she said after a moment's hesitation. "Helena Zimmerman." Finn nearly stumbled over his own feet. "Zimmerman," she looked down at him, confusion clear on her face despite the cold that was making her features stiff. "Yes. Why?" "That is my family name too," Finn said, shaking his head at the strange coincidence. "Finn Zimmerman. Though I suppose it is not the rarest name in the world. Are you from around here?" "No," Helena said, and the single word carried such weight that Finn knew better than to press further just then. "I came from the east, Pennsylvania originally." The wind picked up, and Finn pulled his hat down tighter on his head, wishing he had another coat to replace the one Helena wore. The cold was seeping through his clothes with ruthless efficiency, but he kept his pace steady, knowing that hurrying would only tire them both and risk injury on the increasingly treacherous ground. "What brought you all the way out here?" Finn asked, partly to keep Helena alert and partly because he genuinely wanted to know what could drive a woman alone into the wilderness. Helena was quiet for so long that Finn thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice so soft he almost lost it to the wind, she said, "I was married to a man who believed his fists were an appropriate response to any perceived slight. When I could no longer bear it, I took what little money I had hidden away and bought a ticket west as far as my funds would take me. They took me to Durango, Colorado. From there, I have been making my way south, trading work for food and shelter where I could, trying to get somewhere warm before winter set in." Finn felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and fierce despite the cold surrounding them. He had seen men who raised their hands to women before, had even intervened a time or two when he witnessed such things. The fact that Helena had fled so far with so little spoke to the depths of her desperation. "You are safe now," Finn said firmly. "I will make sure of it." "You do not know me," Helena pointed out, though there was no accusation in her voice, only weariness. "Why would you help me?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Finn answered simply. "And because no one deserves to freeze to death on a mountain trail, especially when help is available." They continued in silence for a while, the storm growing fiercer around them. Ice was forming on everything now, making the horses' steps careful and deliberate. Finn's fingers were going numb where they gripped the reins, and he flexed them periodically to keep the blood flowing. Above them, the sky had turned the color of old pewter, promising even worse weather to come. "Tell me about Aztec," Helena said eventually. "Is it a good town?" "It is small," Finn said. "Maybe 300 people on a busy day, but it has good folks mostly. Farmers, ranchers, traders passing through. There is a general store, a saloon, a church, and a boarding house where you can get a room. The land around here is harsh, but it rewards hard work. The Animas River runs nearby, which helps." "And you?" Helena asked. "What do you do there?" "I work a small ranch about 5 miles outside of town," Finn explained. "Cattle mostly, though I keep a few horses too. It is not much, but it is mine. I was in town today selling some stock and picking up supplies. Good thing too, or I would not have been on this road to find you." Helena made a soft sound that might have been agreement or simply acknowledgement. Finn glanced up and saw that her eyes were starting to droop, which worried him. He knew enough about cold to understand that letting someone fall asleep in these conditions could be fatal. "Helena," he said sharply. "Stay awake, talk to me, tell me about Pennsylvania." She jerked slightly, her eyes opening wider. "What do you want to know?" "Anything," Finn said. "What did you do there? What was your life like before?" Helena took a shaky breath. "My father was a banker. We had a nice house in Philadelphia with servants and a garden. I was educated at a girls' academy, taught all the things a proper young lady should know. Piano, French, needlework, how to manage a household. When I was 19, I was introduced to a man named Richard Sterling. He was handsome, wealthy, well-connected. My father was pleased by the match. We were married 6 months later." She paused, and Finn could see her hands tightening on the saddle horn. "For the first few months, everything seemed fine. Richard was attentive, generous. But then small things began to change. He did not like the way I arranged the flowers. He thought I smiled too much at other men, even though I was only being polite. He started to criticize everything I did, everything I said, everything I wore. And then one night I burned the roast, and he struck me for the first time." Finn felt his jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. He forced himself to keep walking, to keep his voice level. "How long were you married?" 4 years, Helena said. each one worse than the last. I tried to be perfect, tried to anticipate his moods, but it was never enough. He always found something to be angry about. The final time he broke my arm, told the doctor I had fallen down the stairs. That was when I knew I had to leave or he would eventually kill me. Where is he now? Finn asked, needing to know if this man might come looking for her. I do not know, Helena admitted. I left no note, took nothing but the clothes I was wearing and the money I had been saving in secret for over a year. I have been moving for 3 months, never staying anywhere long, always afraid he might find me. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, and now New Mexico territory. I kept thinking if I could just get far enough away, I might finally be free. You are free, Finn said with conviction. Even if he somehow tracked you this far, which I doubt, he would have to go through me to get to you. And I promise you, Helena, that would not end well for him. She looked down at him with an expression he could not quite read. You are either very brave or very foolish, Finn Zimmerman. Probably a bit of both, Finn admitted with a small smile. But I mean what I say. The lights of Aztec finally appeared through the driving sleet, golden and welcoming in the early dusk. Finn had never been so grateful to see that little collection of buildings. He led the horse directly to the boarding house, a 2-story structure with a wide porch and smoke rising from its chimney. Mrs. Patterson herself answered his knock, her round face creasing with concern when she saw Helena's condition. Good heavens, bring her in at once. What happened? Found her on the mountain trail, Finn explained, helping Helena down from the horse. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and he kept an arm around her waist to steady her. She needs a warm room, hot food, and dry clothes. Of course, Mrs. Patterson said, already ushering them inside. The warmth of the house hit Finn like a wall, making his frozen skin prickle painfully. I have a room on the 2nd floor. Come with me, dear. Finn, you get yourself warmed up by the stove. You look half frozen yourself. Finn started to remove his coat from Helena's shoulders, but she caught his hand. Thank you, she said, looking directly into his eyes. You saved my life today. Anyone would have done the same, Finn said, though he knew it was not entirely true. Plenty of men would have ridden right past, not wanting to get involved or simply not caring enough to stop. No, Helena said softly. Not anyone. Thank you, Finn, Mrs. Patterson led Helena upstairs, and Finn moved to the pot-bellied stove in the common room, holding his hands out to the blessed heat. Other boarders were scattered around the room, reading or playing cards, and they eyed him with curiosity but did not ask questions. That was one thing Finn appreciated about frontier life. People generally minded their own business unless invited to do otherwise. After a few minutes, Mrs. Patterson came back downstairs and approached him with a cup of hot coffee. Drink this before you catch pneumonia, she ordered. That was a good thing you did, bringing that poor girl in from the cold. Could not very well leave her there, Finn said, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. More than you might think would have done exactly that, Mrs. Patterson said, echoing his earlier thoughts. She told me a bit of her story while I was helping her into some dry clothes. That husband of hers should be horsewhipped. If I ever meet him, I will be happy to oblige, Finn said grimly. Mrs. Patterson gave him a shrewd look. You have taken a shine to her. I barely know her, Finn protested. Which is not an answer to what I said, Mrs. Patterson pointed out. But never mind. She will need work if she is planning to stay in Aztec. I could use help here at the boarding house if she is willing. Cooking, cleaning, mending. The pay is not much, but it comes with room and board. That is generous of you, Finn said, feeling some of the tension in his shoulders ease. He had been worrying about what would happen to Helena, how she would support herself. I am not being generous, Mrs. Patterson said tartly. "I am being practical. My arthritis has been getting worse and I need the help. If she works hard, we will get along fine. If not, she will be out on her ear just like anyone else would be." But Finn saw the softness in the older woman's eyes and knew she was not nearly as hard-hearted as she pretended. Mrs. Patterson had lost her own husband 10 years ago and had been running the boarding house alone ever since. She understood what it was like to be a woman alone in the world. Finn stayed long enough to finish his coffee and make sure his circulation had returned to his extremities, then headed out to stable his horse at the livery before the storm got any worse. By the time he finished brushing down the gelding and making sure it had feed and water, full dark had fallen and the sleet had turned to snow, coming down in thick, heavy flakes that muffled all sound. He should have headed straight for his ranch, but something made him return to the boarding house instead. Mrs. Patterson had a few spare rooms, and he could afford a night's lodging. It had nothing to do with wanting to make sure Helena was truly all right, he told himself. It was just good sense not to ride out in a storm like this. Mrs. Patterson gave him another one of those knowing looks when he asked for a room, but she handed over a key without comment. "Supper is in an hour," she said. "I will let Miss Helena know you are staying." Finn climbed the stairs to the small room at the end of the hall, noting that Helena's room was just 2 doors down. He could hear the low murmur of women's voices from behind her door, Mrs. Patterson and some of the other female boarders probably, making sure she had everything she needed. He stretched out on the narrow bed and closed his eyes, intending to rest for just a few minutes. Instead, he found himself thinking about the way Helena had looked at him when she thanked him, the quiet strength he had seen beneath her obvious vulnerability. She had been through hell, that much was clear, yet she had not given up. She had fought her way across half the country looking for safety and freedom. That took a kind of courage Finn deeply respected. A knock on his door pulled him from his thoughts. When he opened it, he found Helena standing there, still wearing Mrs. Patterson's borrowed clothes, a simple brown dress that was a bit too large for her frame. Her hair had been brushed out and hung in dark waves around her shoulders, and there was color in her cheeks now, warmth returning to her skin. "I wanted to return your coat," she said, holding out the heavy wool garment, "and to thank you properly. I was not entirely coherent earlier." "You were half frozen," Finn said, taking the coat. "No thanks are necessary, but you are welcome all the same. How are you feeling?" "Much better," Helena said. "Mrs. Patterson has been very kind. She offered me a position here, helping to run the boarding house." "She mentioned she might," Finn said. "Will you take it?" "I think so," Helena said. "It seems like a good opportunity and I have nowhere else to go at the moment, though I worry I will not be very good at it. I have never done that kind of work before." "You will learn," Finn said with confidence. "Mrs. Patterson would not have made the offer if she did not think you could handle it." Helena smiled, and it transformed her entire face, making her beautiful in a way that made Finn's breath catch. "You have a lot of faith in people." "I have faith in you," Finn said, and meant it. They stood there in the hallway for a moment, neither quite sure what to say next. Then Helena took a small step back. "I should let you rest. I just wanted to say thank you and that I hope we will see each other again." "I come into town regularly," Finn said. "For supplies and such. I am sure our paths will cross often." "I would like that," Helena said softly, then turned and walked back to her own room. Finn closed his door and leaned against it, his heart beating faster than it had any right to. He barely knew this woman. She had just escaped a terrible marriage and was in no position to be thinking about another relationship. He had no business feeling this pull toward her, this desire to protect her and know everything about her, but he felt it nonetheless. Supper was a lively affair, with all the boarders gathered around a long table in the dining room. Mrs. Patterson served beef stew and fresh bread, and the conversation flowed easily around topics ranging from the weather to local politics to the price of cattle. Helena sat across from Finn, mostly quiet but listening intently, and he noticed how she flinched slightly whenever one of the male boarders raised his voice, even in laughter. He wanted to reach across the table and take her hand, to tell her she was safe here, but that would draw exactly the kind of attention she probably did not want. Instead, he made sure to keep his own voice gentle, and even when he spoke, and he was careful not to make any sudden movements. After supper, several of the boarders settled in the common room to play cards, and they invited Finn to join them. He accepted, taking a seat that happened to offer a clear view of Helena, who had taken up a spot near the fire with some mending. Mrs. Patterson had wasted no time putting her to work, it seemed, but Helena did not appear to mind. Her hands moved deftly over the fabric, her needle flashing in the firelight. "That the girl you brought in from the cold?" asked Tom Granger, a cattle buyer who stayed at the boarding house whenever he was in town. "Yes," Finn said shortly, not wanting to discuss Helena with strangers. "Pretty thing," Tom observed, "but she looks like she has had a rough time of it." "She has," Finn said, his tone making it clear the subject was closed. Tom raised his hands in a gesture of peace and turned his attention back to his cards. The game continued for another hour, and Finn won a few hands and lost a few more, but his mind was not truly on the cards. It was on the woman across the room, on the way the firelight caught in her dark hair, on the small furrow of concentration between her brows as she worked. Eventually, the boarders began drifting off to bed. Helena rose and bid everyone good night, her eyes catching Finn's for just a moment before she climbed the stairs. He waited a respectable amount of time, then excused himself as well. In his room, Finn lay awake long into the night, listening to the wind howl around the eaves and the snow pile up against the windows. He thought about Helena sleeping just down the hall, about what her life had been like before she came here, about what it might be like in the future. He thought about the strange coincidence of their shared surname, about how she had looked in his coat, about the trust she had shown in accepting his help. By the time sleep finally claimed him, he had made a decision. He would give Helena space and time to heal from what she had endured. But he would also make himself available, let her know through his actions that she had a friend in him, someone she could rely on. And if, in time, something more developed between them, well, he would face that when it came. The storm blew itself out overnight, and Finn woke to brilliant sunshine on pristine snow. He dressed and headed downstairs to find Mrs. Patterson already up and cooking breakfast, with Helena working beside her at the stove. The two women were talking quietly, and he heard Helena laugh at something Mrs. Patterson said, a light, musical sound that made him smile. "Morning," he said from the doorway. Both women turned, and Helena's smile widened when she saw him. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Well enough," Finn said. "And you?" "Better than I have in months," Helena admitted. "It is amazing what a real bed and a locked door can do for one's peace of mind." Mrs. Patterson snorted. "Girl needed a good night's rest after what she has been through. Now stop cluttering up my kitchen, both of you, and go sit down. Breakfast will be ready in 5 minutes." Finn obeyed, taking a seat at the long table. Helena followed a moment later, carrying a pot of coffee and 2 cups. She poured for both of them and sat down beside him, close enough that he caught the scent of lavender soap. "I have been thinking," Helena said quietly. "I owe you much more than just thanks. If there is ever anything I can do to repay you for your kindness, please tell me." "There is no debt," Finn said firmly. I helped because I wanted to, not because I expected anything in return. Even so, Helena persisted, I want you to know that I am grateful, and that I consider you a friend if you are willing. I am willing, Finn said, meeting her eyes. Very willing. The other boarders began filing in for breakfast, and the moment of intimacy passed, but Finn found himself feeling lighter than he had in years. He had come to New Mexico territory 3 years ago to escape his own past, the memories of a ranch in Kansas that had been lost to drought and debt, the death of his parents within months of each other, the dissolution of his brief engagement to a woman who decided she wanted a more comfortable life than he could offer. He had rebuilt himself out here, carved out a new life from hard work and determination. But he had been lonely, though he had not fully acknowledged it until now. Breakfast was eggs and bacon and hot cakes drizzled with honey, and Finn ate with an appetite sharpened by the previous day's exertions. Across the table, Tom Granger was discussing cattle prices with another boarder, while Mrs. Patterson moved efficiently around the room, refilling coffee cups and clearing empty plates. "What are your plans for the day?" Helena asked Finn. "I need to head back to my ranch," Finn said. "I have animals to tend and fences to check after that storm, but I will be back in town in a few days. I usually come in on Saturdays for supplies." "Saturday," Helena repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I will look forward to it." Finn finished his meal and settled his account with Mrs. Patterson, adding a bit extra for the trouble of the unexpected guest. Then he retrieved his horse from the livery and prepared for the ride home. The sun was bright and the air was crisp, and the snow-covered landscape was beautiful in a stark, austere way. As he rode out of town, he glanced back once and saw Helena standing on the porch of the boarding house, her hand raised in farewell. He waved back, then turned his face toward home and urged his horse into a steady trot. The next few days passed in the familiar rhythms of ranch work. Finn checked his cattle, finding them huddled in the lee of a rocky outcrop where they had weathered the storm well. He repaired a section of fence that had blown down, chopped wood for his stove, and cleaned out the barn. His small ranch house was comfortable enough, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living space, a bedroom, and a lean-to for storage. It was not much compared to what he had grown up with, but it was his, bought and paid for with money he had saved from years of working other men's ranches. But despite the satisfaction he usually found in the work, he caught himself thinking about Helena constantly. The way she had looked in the firelight, the sound of her laugh, the courage it must have taken to leave everything she knew and strike out on her own. He wondered how she was settling in at the boarding house, whether Mrs. Patterson was treating her well, whether she was happy. Saturday could not come fast enough. When the day finally arrived, Finn rose early and did his chores with unusual speed. He washed carefully, shaved, and put on his best shirt before saddling his horse and heading to town. He told himself he was just being presentable for a trip to town, but he knew he was lying. Aztec was busy for a Saturday, with ranchers and farmers coming in to do their weekly shopping. Finn tied his horse outside the general store and went in to pick up the supplies he needed: sugar and coffee and flour, and a few other essentials. He took his time selecting his goods, making conversation with the store owner about the weather and the condition of the roads. When he finally emerged back onto the street, he saw Helena walking toward him, a basket over her arm. She wore a different dress today, a blue calico that must have been another loan from Mrs. Patterson, and her hair was pinned up in a neat bun. She looked healthy and rested, the haunted look beginning to fade from her eyes. "Finn," she said warmly, "I was hoping I would see you." "Helena," he replied, feeling his heart pick up speed. "How have you been?" "Busy," she said with a smile. "Mrs. Patterson has been teaching me all the ins and outs of running a boarding house. There is much more to it than I expected, but I am learning." "I am glad to hear it," Finn said. "Are you happy there?" Helena considered the question seriously. "I think I am," she said. "Or at least, I am beginning to be. It is strange, after everything, to feel safe. To not wake up every morning afraid of what the day might bring. I keep expecting something to go wrong, for Richard to appear, for this all to be taken away. But each day I wake up and I am still here, still free, and it gets a little easier to believe it is real." "It is real," Finn said gently. "You made it real by being brave enough to leave." Helena looked down at her basket. "Sometimes I do not feel brave. Sometimes I feel like a coward for running." "Running from danger is not cowardice," Finn said firmly. "Staying in a situation that was killing you would not have been brave. It would have been foolish. You did the right thing." "Thank you for saying that," Helena said quietly. "I need to hear it sometimes." They stood there on the wooden sidewalk, people flowing around them, and Finn wished he could think of something to say that would make all her doubts and fears disappear. But he knew there were no such words. Time and safety would heal her, not platitudes. "Would you like to walk with me?" Helena asked. "I need to pick up a few things for Mrs. Patterson, but I am in no hurry." "I would like that very much," Finn said. They walked together through the town, stopping at various shops. Helena purchased thread and buttons at the general store, vegetables from a farmer's stand, a new washboard to replace the one that had cracked. Finn found himself carrying her basket for her, and they talked about everything and nothing. She told him more about her life in Philadelphia, the balls and social events that had been her world before her marriage. He told her about growing up in Kansas, about learning to ride before he could walk, about the devastating drought that had destroyed his family's livelihood. "We have both lost so much," Helena observed, "yet here we are starting over in this wild place." "The West has a way of giving people second chances," Finn said, "if they are willing to work for them." "I am willing," Helena said. "Whatever it takes, I am willing." They ended up at a small restaurant on the edge of town, and Finn invited her to lunch. They sat at a table by the window and ordered sandwiches and coffee, and the conversation flowed easily between them. Finn found himself telling her things he had not talked about in years, his hopes for his ranch, his dreams of building a real herd and maybe even a bigger house someday. Helena listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, offering encouragement. "You will do it," she said with conviction. "I can tell you are the kind of man who accomplishes what he sets out to do." "I hope you are right," Finn said. "What about you? What are your dreams, Helena?" She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. "Honestly, I have not let myself dream in so long I am not sure I remember how. For years, my only dream was to survive. But now, maybe I can start to think about what I actually want from life." "And what do you want?" Finn asked softly. "Peace," Helena said immediately. "Safety. The freedom to make my own choices. Beyond that, I do not know yet, but I am looking forward to finding out." After lunch, Finn walked Helena back to the boarding house. On the porch, she turned to him with a smile. "Thank you for today. I cannot remember the last time I enjoyed myself so much." "Neither can I," Finn admitted. "I would like to do it again if you are willing." "I am very willing," Helena said, echoing his words from earlier in the week. "When will you be back in town?" "Wednesday, if the weather holds," Finn said. "I have some business at the bank." "Wednesday then," Helena agreed. "I will look forward to it." Finn rode home that evening with a lightness in his heart he had not felt in longer than he could remember. He was falling for Helena, he could admit that to himself now. It was fast, probably too fast, but there was something about her that called to him on a level he did not fully understand. Maybe it was their shared experiences of loss and starting over. Maybe it was the strength he saw in her, the determination to build a new life despite everything she had been through. Or maybe it was simply the way she looked at him, like he was someone worth knowing, someone who mattered. Whatever the reason, he knew he wanted to spend more time with her, to get to know her better, to see if what he was feeling might be reciprocated. The following Wednesday, Finn rode into town with his heart in his throat. He conducted his business at the bank, depositing the money from his recent cattle sale and discussing the possibility of a loan to expand his herd. Then he made his way to the boarding house, where he found Helena in the garden behind the building, hanging laundry on a line. She looked up at his approach and smiled, that same radiant expression that made him feel like the sun had come out from behind clouds. "You came," she said, as if there had been any doubt. "I said I would," Finn replied, dismounting and tying his horse to the fence. "I know," Helena said. "But I am still getting used to the idea that people might actually do what they say they will do." The casual comment spoke volumes about her marriage, and Finn felt that now familiar anger kindle in his chest. "I will always keep my word to you," he said seriously. "I hope in time you will come to believe that." "I am starting to," Helena said, pinning the last sheet to the line. "Mrs. Patterson gave me a few hours off this afternoon. Would you like to go for a walk? There is a trail along the river that she says is beautiful." "That sounds perfect," Finn said. They walked together out of town, following a path that wound through cottonwood trees down to the Animas River. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stones, and the sound of it was soothing. They found a spot on the bank where a large flat rock made a natural seat, and they sat together, shoulders almost touching. "I have been thinking about what you said," Helena said after a while. "About dreams. I think I know what mine is now." "What is it?" Finn asked. "I want a home," Helena said simply. "Not just a place to live, but a real home. Somewhere I feel safe and wanted. Somewhere I belong. I thought I had that when I married Richard, but I was wrong. Or maybe he changed. I do not know, but I want to find it again for real this time." "You will," Finn said with certainty. "You deserve that, Helena. You deserve every good thing." She turned to look at him, and there was something in her eyes that made his breath catch. "You are a very kind man, Finn Zimmerman. I am lucky I happened to be on that trail the day you came by." "I think I am the lucky one," Finn said, and before he could second-guess himself, he reached out and took her hand. Helena looked down at their joined hands, and for a moment Finn thought he had gone too far, moved too fast. But then her fingers curled around his, holding on tight, and she smiled. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, watching the river flow by. Neither of them said much, but words seemed unnecessary. Finn felt a sense of rightness settle over him, a certainty that this was where he was supposed to be with this woman at this moment. Eventually, they had to return to town. Finn walked Helena back to the boarding house, reluctant to let go of her hand even when they reached the porch. "When can I see you again?" he asked. "I have Sunday afternoons off," Helena said. "If you wanted to come to church in the morning, we could spend the afternoon together." "I will be here," Finn promised. Sunday could not come fast enough. Finn attended the small church in Aztec, sitting in the back pew and watching as Helena came in with Mrs. Patterson and the other boarders. She caught his eye and smiled, and he felt warmth spread through his chest. After the service, they walked together to a small grove of trees on the outskirts of town, where they could talk without being overheard. They sat on a fallen log, and Finn found himself telling her about his plans for the ranch, about the hard work and the setbacks, about the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. Helena listened with her full attention, asking questions and offering insights that showed she understood what he was trying to accomplish. "I admire your determination," she said. "It takes real courage to start over, to build a new life from nothing." "You have that same courage," Finn pointed out. "Look at what you have done, what you are doing. You left everything familiar and traveled across the country alone. You are learning a whole new way of life. That takes incredible strength." "I had no choice," Helena said, but there was less conviction in her voice than there had been before. "You had a choice," Finn said gently. "You could have stayed. Many women in your situation do, because leaving seems too hard or too dangerous. But you chose to save yourself to fight for a better life. That is courage, Helena." Tears welled in her eyes, but she was smiling. "You make me feel like I am worth something," she said softly. "Like I matter." "You do matter," Finn said, taking both her hands in his. "You matter to me." Helena looked at him with such hope and vulnerability that Finn felt his heart clench. He wanted to kiss her, wanted it more than he had wanted anything in a long time. But he held back, knowing it was too soon, that she needed time to heal before she could think about opening her heart to someone new. Instead, he just held her hands and let her see in his eyes what he was feeling. She must have understood because she squeezed his fingers and said, "I am not ready yet, for whatever might be between us, but I want to be." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Finn said. "I am not going anywhere, Helena. Take all the time you need." The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Finn came to town twice a week, and he and Helena would spend whatever time she could spare together. They walked and talked, shared meals when they could, learned about each other in 1,000 small ways. Finn discovered that Helena loved to read, but had had little access to books during her marriage. He started bringing her novels from his small collection at home, and they would discuss them during their times together. Helena shared more about her life before, the good parts she was learning to remember along with the bad. She told him about her mother, who had died when Helena was 15, about the dreams she had had as a girl of seeing the world. She told him about the first time Richard hit her, the excuses she had made for him, the slow erosion of her self-worth, until she had almost believed she deserved the treatment she received. "I am not that person anymore," she said one crisp December afternoon as they sat by the river. "I will never let anyone make me feel that small again." "Good," Finn said fiercely. "You are strong and smart and brave, and anyone who cannot see that is a fool." As Christmas approached, Finn found himself thinking about the future more and more. He was in love with Helena. He could admit that to himself now. He loved her strength, her gentleness, her quick mind, her determination to build a new life. He loved the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she listened when he talked, the way she looked at him like he was someone special. But he did not know if she felt the same way. She cared for him, he was certain of that. But caring and loving were different things, and he did not want to push her, did not want to ask for more than she was ready to give. The week before Christmas, Mrs. Patterson organized a party at the boarding house for all the residents and their friends. Finn was invited, of course, and he arrived bearing gifts, a warm shawl for Mrs. Patterson, tobacco for some of the male boarders he had gotten friendly with, and a book of poetry for Helena that he had ordered special from a catalog. When he gave it to her, her eyes lit up with such joy that he knew he had chosen well. "Finn, this is beautiful. Thank you." "I remembered you said you loved poetry," he said, feeling suddenly shy. "I hope you do not already have this collection." "I do not," Helena assured him. "And even if I did, I would treasure it because it came from you." The party was lively and warm, with food and drink and caroling. At one point, someone produced a fiddle and there was dancing. Finn worked up the courage to ask Helena to dance, and she accepted with a smile. As they moved together to the music, Finn became acutely aware of her hand in his, her other hand resting lightly on his shoulder, the small space between them. "Helena," he said quietly, so only she could hear, "I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "What is it?" "I am in love with you," Finn said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I know it is too soon. I know you are not ready, and I am not asking for anything in return. I just needed you to know. I love you, Helena. I think I have from the moment I saw you on that trail." Helena stopped dancing, standing still in the middle of the room even as other couples moved around them. For a terrible moment, Finn thought he had made a catastrophic mistake. But then she smiled, a tremulous, beautiful smile that made her whole face glow. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been afraid to admit it even to myself, but I do, Finn, I love you." Finn felt like his heart might burst from joy. "Really, really," Helena confirmed. "You have shown me what love should be: kindness, respect, patience. You have never asked me to be anything other than who I am. You have made me feel safe and valued and cherished. How could I not love you?" Without thinking, Finn pulled her close and kissed her, right there in the middle of Mrs. Patterson's parlor. It was a gentle kiss, sweet and full of promise, and when they pulled apart, the other guests were clapping and whistling. Helena blushed furiously, but she was laughing, and Finn did not care who saw. Let the whole town know he loved this woman. He was proud of it. After the party, Finn walked Helena out to the porch, where they could have a moment of relative privacy. "I do not want to rush you," he said, taking both her hands. "But I need you to know my intentions are serious. When you are ready, when enough time has passed, I want to marry you, Helena. I want to build a life with you." "How long should we wait?" Helena asked. "Society would say at least a year, probably more, but I do not care what society thinks anymore. I only care what is right for us." "What feels right to you?" Finn asked. Helena considered carefully. "I think we should wait until spring," she said. "Give ourselves a few more months to be certain. But if we still feel the same way when the wildflowers bloom, then I see no reason to wait longer." "Spring it is," Finn agreed, already counting the weeks in his head. It was December now, so spring would be April or May. 4 or 5 months. He could wait that long if he had to, though it would not be easy. Over the winter, their relationship deepened. Finn came to town as often as his ranch duties allowed, and Helena began accompanying him on short trips outside of town, always properly chaperoned by Mrs. Patterson or one of the other boarders. They talked about their future, the life they would build together. Finn wanted to expand his ranch, maybe build a bigger house. Helena wanted to have a garden, maybe some chickens. They both wanted children, several of them, and a home full of love and laughter. In February, a letter arrived for Helena at the boarding house. She showed it to Finn with shaking hands. It was from her father in Philadelphia, written in care of General Delivery in Durango, which must have been forwarded to Aztec. "How did he know where to find you?" Finn asked. "I sent him a letter a few weeks ago," Helena admitted. "I thought he deserved to know I was safe, that I was all right. I was not sure if he would respond." The letter was short but emotional. Helena's father wrote that he was relieved beyond measure to hear from her. He said he had suspected something was wrong in her marriage, but had not wanted to interfere. When she disappeared, Richard had claimed she had run away with a lover, but her father had not believed it. He had been making inquiries, trying to find her, though he had had no success until her letter arrived. He ended by saying that if Helena wished to come home, she would be welcomed with open arms. But if she had truly found happiness in New Mexico territory, he would respect her choice and wished her every joy. He enclosed money, Helena said, showing Finn the bank draft that had been folded into the letter. Enough to pay for a train ticket back to Philadelphia and more besides. "What do you want to do?" Finn asked, his heart in his throat. The thought of losing her now was unbearable, but he would not stand in her way if she wanted to return to her old life. "I want to stay here," Helena said without hesitation. "I want to marry you and build a life in Aztec. But I would like to write to my father, tell him about you, about my plans. He deserves to know." "Of course," Finn said, relief washing over him. "Write to him, tell him everything, and tell him that I will do everything in my power to make you happy." Helena wrote a long letter to her father that evening, telling him about Finn, about their plans to marry in the spring, about the life she was building in New Mexico territory. She used some of the money he had sent to purchase fabric for a wedding dress, which she began sewing with Mrs. Patterson's help. As the weather slowly warmed and the first hints of spring appeared in the budding trees and greening grass, Finn and Helena began making concrete plans. They set a date for the wedding, the first Saturday in May. Finn worked on expanding his small house, adding a second bedroom and a proper kitchen. Helena filled a hope chest with linens and dishes, preparing for her new role as a rancher's wife. The night before the wedding, Finn lay awake in his house, thinking about how much his life had changed in the past 6 months. He had been lonely and isolated, focused solely on building his ranch and surviving. Now he was about to marry the woman he loved, to start a family, to build a future that was about more than just survival. The wedding was simple but beautiful, held in the small church in Aztec with most of the town in attendance. Helena wore the dress she had made herself, a creation of white muslin with lace at the collar and cuffs. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Finn had picked that morning, and she looked more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. As they stood before the minister and exchanged their vows, Finn felt a sense of rightness and completion wash over him. This was his wife, his partner, his love. Together they would face whatever the future brought. The reception was held at the boarding house with Mrs. Patterson outdoing herself with food and drink. There was dancing and laughter and countless toasts to the happy couple. When it was time to leave, Finn lifted Helena onto his horse and they rode together out to the ranch, to the home that was now theirs. Inside, Finn had spent the previous day cleaning and decorating. There were wildflowers in jars on every surface, and he had made up the bed with new linens. A fire crackled in the hearth, warming the room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Zimmerman," Finn said, lifting Helena down from the horse. "It is strange to be called that," Helena said with a smile. "But good strange. This is really our home now, our home," Finn confirmed, "for as long as we both shall live." That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Helena told Finn about her fears that she would never be able to trust a man again, never be able to open her heart. "But you changed that," she said softly. "You showed me that love does not have to hurt, that it can be gentle and kind and beautiful. Thank you for that, Finn. Thank you for saving me in every possible way." "You saved me too," Finn said, holding her close. "I was just going through the motions before I met you. Now I have a reason to build a future. Something to work toward that is bigger than just myself." The first months of their marriage were an adjustment as they learned to live together, to navigate the small challenges of daily life as a couple. Helena learned to cook on a wood stove and to tend the chickens Finn bought for her. Finn learned to be more careful about tracking mud into the house and to share the decision-making about their home. But through it all, their love for each other only grew stronger. They talked about everything, shared their hopes and fears, made plans for the future. And when Helena discovered she was pregnant in late summer, their joy was complete. "A baby," she said wonderingly, her hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Finn asked, though he could see the answer in her radiant smile. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Helena said. "I am going to be a mother, Finn. We are going to have a family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Helena bloomed with health. Finn became even more protective than usual, constantly worrying about her and trying to make sure she did not overexert herself. Helena bore his fussing with good humor, understanding that it came from a place of love. In March of 1885, on a clear, cold morning, Helena gave birth to a son. Finn held the tiny, squalling infant in his arms and felt tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he said. "You are both perfect." They named him Samuel, after Finn's father, and he was the first of many children. Over the next 10 years, Helena and Finn had 5 children in total, 3 boys and 2 girls. Their home was always full of noise and laughter and love. The ranch grew and prospered too. Finn expanded his herd and built new barns and corrals. Helena planted a large garden that provided vegetables for the family and extras to sell in town. They worked hard, but they also made time for each other, for quiet evenings on the porch after the children were in bed, for stolen kisses in the barn, for the small intimacies that kept their love fresh. Helena's father came to visit when Samuel was 2 years old, making the long journey from Philadelphia to meet his grandson and his son-in-law. He stayed for a month, and Finn could see how relieved the older man was to see his daughter truly happy and thriving. Before he left, he pulled Finn aside and said, "Thank you for taking care of my girl. I can see she made the right choice staying here with you." "I am the one who should be thanking you," Finn said, "for raising such an incredible woman." As the years passed, Finn and Helena became pillars of the Aztec community. They helped their neighbors, supported the church and school, and raised their children to be kind and hardworking. Their home was always open to those in need, and more than once they took in travelers who had fallen on hard times, just as Finn had taken in Helena all those years ago. Helena never heard from Richard again. It was as if her old life had simply ceased to exist the moment she stepped off that train in Durango. She was grateful for that, for the clean break that allowed her to fully embrace her new identity as Finn's wife, as a mother, as a respected member of the community. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Finn surprised Helena with a trip to Durango, their first time away from the ranch and children for more than a day in years. They stayed in a hotel, had dinner at a nice restaurant, and walked through the town holding hands like newlyweds. "Do you ever regret it?" Finn asked as they sat on a bench in the town square, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "Giving up your comfortable life in Philadelphia for a hard life on a ranch in New Mexico territory?" "Never," Helena said without hesitation. "That comfortable life was killing me, Finn. This life, our life, is real. It is hard sometimes, but it is honest and true. I have you, I have our children, I have a home where I feel safe and loved. What more could I possibly want?" "I love you," Finn said, kissing her softly. "More now than ever." "And I love you," Helena replied. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Finn Zimmerman, the absolute best thing." As they sat together watching the stars come out, Finn thought back to that cold November day when he had found a freezing woman on a mountain trail and offered her his coat. She had said he would catch his death, worried about him even in her own desperate situation. But instead of death, he had found life. He had found love and purpose and everything that made life worth living. Their children grew up strong and happy. Samuel, the eldest, eventually took over the ranch, running it with the same dedication his father had shown. The second son, Jacob, became a teacher in Aztec. The third son, Daniel, moved to Santa Fe and went into business. Their eldest daughter, Grace, married a doctor and settled in Albuquerque. The youngest, Ruth, surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, one of the first women to practice law in New Mexico territory. Finn and Helena lived to see all their children grown and settled, to meet their grandchildren, to celebrate 50 years of marriage. On that golden anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a party that lasted 3 days. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, along with friends from all over the territory who had come to honor the couple. During the party, one of the grandchildren asked Helena to tell the story of how she and Finn met. Helena looked at her husband, their eyes meeting across the crowded room, and smiled. "Well," she said, gathering the children around her. "It was a very cold day in November, and I was walking alone on a mountain trail, thinking I might not survive the night. But then a cowboy came riding up on a bay horse, and he offered me his coat." "What did you say?" one of the grandchildren asked. "I told him he would catch his death," Helena said. "I was worried about him, even though I was the one who needed help. But he insisted, and he brought me to town, and he saved my life in every way a person can be saved." "And then you fell in love?" another grandchild asked. "And then we fell in love," Finn confirmed, coming to stand beside his wife. "It was not fast or easy, but it was real, and it has lasted all these years." As the party continued around them, Finn took Helena's hand and led her out onto the porch where they could have a moment of relative quiet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. 50 years, Helena said wonderingly. "Half a century since you found me on that trail." "Best decision I ever made stopping to help you," Finn said. "Best decision I ever made accepting that help," Helena replied. "I was so scared that day, Finn. Scared of the cold, scared of what might happen to me, scared that I had made a terrible mistake leaving Richard. But then you came along and everything changed." "We changed each other," Finn said. "I was just existing before I met you. You taught me how to really live." They stood together on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the mountains, listening to the sounds of their family celebrating inside. They had built a good life together, faced challenges and overcome them, raised children who were now raising children of their own. They had loved each other through good times and bad, through illness and health, through all the 1,000 small moments that made up a marriage. "Do you remember what I said on our wedding night?" Helena asked softly. "That you had saved me in every possible way." "I remember," Finn said. "I want you to know that is still true," Helena said. "Every single day for 50 years, you have saved me with your love, your patience, your unwavering support. I could never have imagined that day on the trail that my life would turn out like this, that I would be so blessed." "I am the blessed one," Finn said, pulling her close. "You took a broken cowboy with nothing but a small ranch and big dreams, and made him the richest man in the territory. Not in money, though we have done well enough, but in love and family and everything that truly matters." They kissed, a gentle kiss that spoke of a lifetime of love, and then they turned to go back inside to their family. But first, Finn paused and looked out at the land he had worked for so many years, the home he had built with his own hands, the legacy he and Helena were leaving to their children and grandchildren. It had all started with a simple act of kindness, offering a coat to a freezing woman on a cold November day. But that moment had changed everything, had set in motion a love story that would span decades and touch countless lives. As they walked back inside, hand in hand, Finn thought about the young man he had been, lonely and isolated, working his ranch with nothing but determination and hope. He barely recognized that person now. Helena had transformed him, just as he had transformed her, and together they had built something beautiful and lasting. The party went on late into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. Finn and Helena sat together surrounded by their children and grandchildren, watching the next generation create their own memories. They were older now, their hair silver, their movements slower, but their love for each other was as strong as ever. In the quiet hours before dawn, after the last guests had left, and the house had finally fallen silent, Finn and Helena lay together in their bed, the same bed they had shared for 50 years. "I hope we have many more years together," Helena said softly. "But if we do not, I want you to know that I have no regrets. You gave me the life I always dreamed of, even when I did not know I was dreaming it." "We will have more years," Finn said with confidence. "I am not ready to let you go yet." And they did have more years, 5 of them, before Helena passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 76. Finn was devastated by her loss, but he took comfort in the life they had built together, in the children and grandchildren who carried on their legacy. He lived another 3 years, spending his time with family and working the ranch alongside Samuel. He told stories about Helena to anyone who would listen, keeping her memory alive with every word. And when he finally passed away at the age of 79, surrounded by his family, his last words were, "I am coming, Helena. Wait for me." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a pair of cottonwood trees that had grown from saplings they planted together on their first anniversary. Their headstone was simple but eloquent. Finn and Helena Zimmerman, partners in life, united in death. Their love was a blessing to all who knew them. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, and the story of how Finn and Helena met was passed down through the years, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and love. In Aztec, they were remembered as pillars of the community, people who had lived with integrity and compassion, who had shown by example what a good marriage and a good life could be. And on cold November days, when the wind came down from the mountains and the first snow began to fall, people would sometimes think of that long-ago meeting on a mountain trail, when a cowboy offered his coat to a freezing woman and changed both their lives forever. It was a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could have profound consequences, that love could be found in the most unexpected places, and that second chances were possible for those brave enough to reach for them. The end.